Good morning. We're learning as a schutz for Shleima Filana Chai Bas Sarach and for Basian Bas Chaya. We're on Daf Kuf Beis Amid Aleph, about 12 lines, 14 lines from the bottom. I think we're up to Amar of Gidel Amarav. Right, we had just seen the machlokes by the din of Eivim and Achai. Does it apply? We said that a Yid who eats Eivim and Achai, that's only, and the machlokes is that only apply to kosher meat from a kosher animal, or does it also apply to a non-kosher animal? That was the first machlokes. Rameir says not only does it not apply to a non-kosher animal, it doesn't even apply to a chayiv v'oif. It only applies to a behema. So those are the three shittas we saw. Now the Gemara is going to talk about a slightly different din. That was all about a yid eating evim and achai, all the mitzvahs applied to yidden. Amar of Gidel Amarav, machlokes b'Yisrael. This machlokes that we just said is by a Jew eating evim and achai. Avol beben noyach dev'yakol muzer al tmein k'tahirin. But a ben noyach, there's no distinction between eating from a tamei animal, a non-kosher animal, evim and achai, or eating evim and achai from a kosher animal. Right? It sounds silly to say. You think about it, it sounds strange to say that a guy is only usher for evim and achai from a kosher animal. There's no distinction between kosher and non-kosher. Yidden are only have a chiyuv of evim and achai for tahirin. Ikadamri tahira. Some have, instead of that last word, Yisrael eni muzer el tahirin, they have eni muzer el tahira, meaning only on the behema. According to Reb Meir, there's only one kind of behema that a yid is chayav on. It's going like Rameh. Ikadamri tahirim v'rabbanan. Some say like tahirim, meaning Yidden are only chayiv on either a behema or they are chayiv v'oif. They're only excluded from non-kosher animals. Certainly not like the Mandamar who said that like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Lazar who had said that Yechayiv even a yid is chayiv even for evim and achai on a behemoth tmei. But it's not clear. There are two versions. One is like each of the other mandam. Amr of Shizbi. Shizbi says Avanan Nami Tnina. We also have a Mishnah that supports this. That Rav Gidel is saying that evim and achai on a non-Jew, right? It's one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei noach, so it applies to a non-Jew. That applies even on behemoth tmei. Achal evim and achai. Mimena. This is a Mishnah in, where is it? In Tahiris. It's talking about an oif tameh, a non-kosher bird. So we say, Achal Ever min achai mimena. If someone ate an Ever min achai from a non-kosher bird, ain't a sefer garboim. He doesn't get malchus. So the Gemara is gonna later on have to explain why doesn't he get it. Even if he doesn't get Alts Evim and Achai, because let's say we hold, it could be because we hold like Rameir, or we'll see why, whatever the reason is, but why shouldn't it at least be because of eating a Oif Tameh? You shouldn't be at. And Shchita will not be Metaret. So we're going to have to explain, I'll tell you right now, I'll tell you in advance what the Gemara is going to explain in order to be able to just read these words. The first din is going to be going on a yid, which is going to be talking about that when a yid eats from an oif tameh evim and achai, he's not going to get malchus. We'll explain why it's not going to be because of eating a behemoth tameh, but the reason why he won't chayiv al evim and achai is because it's a oif tameh. So it's not. We said it's only for a behemoth, a kosher animal that you have a din of evim and achai. And the second part, ein shchita mitarasa. It's talking about for a non-Jew, and we're saying that although for a yid, there's no once you do shechita, there's no din of ever menachai. Even if the animal is still somewhat flopping around, it doesn't make a difference. The shechita ends the din of ever menachai. But on a guy, there's no such thing. So if you shecht an animal, but the animal is still somewhat alive, the non-Jew will still have a din of ever menachai. Now we're going to have the Gemara explain that. But what are we talking about? Elam b'Yisrael pshita de ein shchita metarasa. We're talking about a yid. Obviously, shchita is not going to be metar. It's not. It's going to anyway be usher that. What is that? Because it's a non-kosher animal. Why would we think that shchita is going to help? We're talking about non-Jews. You see that a non-Jew is usher. So you see that it's usher for a non-Jew to eat non-kosher animals as Eber Menachai. Ramani Bar Patish, Rami Reisha, Sefer Mashani. Rav Mani Bar Patish asked it as a kasha, direct kasha, that the Reisha seems to be saying that you're potter for eating Ever Menachai from a non-kosher animal. And the Sefer is saying, since he's saying that you are going to be Chai. So we say Reisha b'Yisrael, the Sefer b'ben Nayach. And he answers the same way. The Reisha is talking about a Yid, and it's saying that Achal Ever Menachai Mimena Ein Sefer Gabayim doesn't get Malkus for Ever Menachai, like we said. We're going according to the Manda Amar, who says there's no Ever Menachai for a Yid on a behemoth Tmeya. The Sefer is b'ben Nayach that Shchita is not going to be mitar. Amar Rab Ever Menachai Tzarech Kazayis. Ever Menachai, in order to be chayiv, even though this is not like we have intimated earlier, Rav holds that Ever Menachai, even if you eat an entire Ever, you're not going to be chayiv unless there's a kazayis. My timer, achila ksivabe. The Torah says, "V'chazak levilti echol hadam ki adam u'nefesh lo seichol hanefesh emabasa." We learn from lo seichol hanefesh emabasa. That's the din of Ever Menachai. The Torah says achila needs a kazayis. Maser Rav Ram says this is true that Ever Menachai, like Rav says, needs to have a kazayis. Achal Ever Menachai mimena. We're asking for this mission we just quoted. If you ate Ever Menachai from a non-kosher bird, ain't a sefer kazayim. He doesn't get malchus for eating it. Ain't shchita metarasa. These agadaitach be'inin kazayis. If you're going to say that Yitaka need a kazayis for Ever Menachai, typically the kachal kazayis, and it's I think some of the Mefarshim add in the words of behemoth tmeya or oif tameh. So this is going to be we're sort of in a backhanded way addressing the earlier question: why in that Mishnah, if the first part of the Mishnah is talking about where a Yisrael is eating Ever Menachai from a oif tameh, why isn't there a chiyuv alts oif tameh? Forgetting about the Ever Menachai. So this, we're sort of answering. The answer must be we're talking about where he ate less than a kazayis. He ate an entire Ever, but it's less than a kazayis. Less than a kazayis. There's no isser of oif tameh. There's no isser of eating a non-kosher animal for less than a kazayis. It says achila. But according to Rav, that says for Ever Menachai you also need a kazayis. So if it's less than a kazayis, then there wouldn't be Ever Menachai for that reason. It doesn't make a difference that this is an Ever Tmeya, an Oif Tameh, you wouldn't have to come on to that. So it must be talking about L'chaira, where it's more than a kazayis. So if that's the case, again, why isn't it Chayiv out Oif Tameh? How could we say he doesn't get Malchus? So Gemara, the Amar of Nachman, B'mashu Basar Gidim V'atzamas. Achanami B'mashu Basar Gidim V'atzamas. The answer is that there's a difference between the Chiyav of a kazayis that Rav says for Ever Menachai and the Chiyav of kazayis for oif tameh. Oif tameh, you need taka basar. Like we said before, if someone ate the hoof, or let's say if you hold gid is not ein begid anosher b'nais and tam, we said that's not going to be chayiv if you eat that from a behemoth tameh or an oif tameh, because the isser of eating from a non-kosher animal has to be edible. But there's no such din by Ever Menachai. Ever Menachai, it means the Ever, and that includes the Gidin Ve'atzamis. So if we're talking about over here where there is a Kazayas together with the Gidin Ve'atzamis, but there is no Kazayas without it. So therefore the only potential Isser over here is Alts Ever Menachai. And that's what we're saying, that you're not going to be Chayiv on Ever Menachai from an Oif Tummy. Toshma, another kasha on Rav's rule that you need a kazayis for Ever Menachai. The Omar Rav, Achol Tzipor Tahira B'chayeh. If someone ate an entire, now we're moving from non-kosher birds to kosher birds. So Rav says if someone ate a kosher bird, a full kosher bird, while it's alive, b'choshu, it's with a kosher, doesn't have to eat a kazayis. Now we're going to see soon. It's going to be a machlokes. Rav is stating by saying this. He's saying two things. First of all, he's saying you only need a culture, which we're going to have to explain. That's l'chayr shver and Rav's rule that you need a kazayis. But secondly, he's saying that when you eat an entire bird is treated as being made up of many individual evarim, and he's going to be chayiv for eating the separate evarim. It's considered Ever Menachai. You don't say that until it's separated, it's not considered to be a separate Ever. So we say Achol Tzipor Tahira B'chayeh B'choshu. B'misasa, and when it dies, b'kazayis. Then he's going to be chayiv. He's only chayiv for kazayis after it dies. Then it's al nevela, and nevela is not going to be aser for with the mashu. It's going to need the kazayis. And if it's a behemoth tmeya, whether it's alive or whether it's dead, it's going to be b'kolshu. Because it's a beria, it's an entire beria, and beria is going to be chayiv for behemoth tmeya with a kolshu. So, but in any case, our problem is we said b'misasa b'kazayis. If it dies, it's b'kazayis. I'm sorry. Because that's not the shver part. B'misasa b'kazayis l'chayra. Right? We said in the first part. But we said the over on Ever Menachai with the kolshu. L'chayra that's shver and Rav. It really is a kazayis. Even though we're saying oh tzipor Torah b'chayeh b'choshu, it means b'choshu of basar, but it has to have a kazayis of basar together with gidin v'atzamis, which is a strange thing. We're saying b'choshu, and b'choshu over here doesn't mean koshu; it merely means a kazayis of other things. Tashma natul tzipor she'ein by kazayis ba'achloi. If someone took a tzipor that doesn't have a kazayis and he ate it, Rebbe Paiter. Now we're switching. We're not talking about Rab. You have to remember we're talking about Rebbe. Now we're bringing the machlokes tanoim. So the Brisa says, if someone took a tzipor that doesn't have a kazayis and he ate it, Rebbe says you potter. Or Shimon mechayev. Shimon say chayev. Why? What's the point of the machlokes? Because Shimon kal v'chaymer al every man chayev al kol loy kol shechein. Rav Elazar Shimon is essentially saying that a entire bird is made up of constituent evarim. So when you eat the whole bird, you're also eating the evarim, and the evarim are treated as separate evarim, and therefore you don't need to have a kosher who is enough because each avar is enough. But Rebbe will say no, you don't look at it as a bunch of evarim. Right now you're looking at it as an entire behemoth. The Torah says Ever Menachai. It doesn't say if you eat a chaya kula. Chanka v'achla, but if the animal was killed, you choked it and it died, and then you ate it, at that point it becomes aser alts nevela, And nevela, you need a kazayas. There's no. We said that there is a din of behemoth meya is a beria, but on nevela there's no din of beria. You're going to need a kazayas. Ad kan pligi el the marsav b'chayel levar memedus, marsav b'chayel lave levar memedus. The machlekes Rebbe and Rebbe Lozer in the first part of the mission, where you ate an entire tzipah that didn't have a kazayas, they were just arguing about whether you can look at the different avarim while the animal is whole and treat it as avar menachai because of the avarim that make up the whole animal. But the kuli alma mia lo being in kazayas, but they all agree that even though it's a tzipah that doesn't have a kazayas, you'll be chayiv. The only question is whether it's considered to be an avar here. So chayrit shver and rav. So this is the original source of where Rav Nachman came from, that he's saying it's talking about where there is, even though it said a mashu, it means a mashu of basar, but there really is a kazayas of, if you include the bones and the sinews. Correct the Gemara, but this is a very strange case. Umika midi, the bekula lesbe kazayas basar, ubechad aver is kazayas. But mashu basar gidim v'atzamis. How could you have such a thing? That there's no. We're talking about over here. He ate the whole tzipra. We're saying he's potter because it doesn't have a kazayas basar. How could you have an entire bird that doesn't have a kazayas basar in it? But when you look at the individual avarim, because that's why he's being chayiv according to Rebbe Elazar Rav Shimon, because you look at each avar separately. And he's saying each avar separately, or some of the avarim separately, have a kazayas, a bas or gidim vatzamas. It seems it seems a very strange thing that the bird, an entire bird, it must be a tiny bird like a swallow or a hummingbird, or even less than that. Kazayas is a small amount, the size of an olive. It's a tiny bird, doesn't have a kazayas basar, but if you add the bones and the sinews of one single avar, it's going to be over a kazayas. Amrav Shabia in the Kalnisa. He says, yeah, there is such a bird. It's called a Kalnisa. It's a very, very skinny bird that's made up of skin and bones, and it doesn't have a kazayas basar in the whole thing. Ema seifa chanka v'yacha divrei hakol b'kazayas. We said if you choked it, you killed the bird, then you're going to be chayiv or kazayas. But Kalnisa oif tamehu. How can you be chayiv for an oif? It's an oif tummy. We're saying you're chayiv for nevela with a kazayas, but this kalnisa is an oif tummy. Oif tummy doesn't have a requirement of a kazayas. It's chayiv for a mashu. Ela ain't kalnisa. The Gemara says no. It doesn't mean that it's actually talking about kalnisa. It's talking about something similar to kalnisa. It's an iftar that has a similar structure to the kalnisa. Amarab, imtim salaim asav Rebbe machshavas eichlin shma machshava. Rebbe was the man Amar before who had said that if you took this entire bird, and you ate it, you're not going to be chayiv because you don't divide up the bird into its separate avarim. You look at it as a whole bird, and it's not considered to, at this point, be avarim that you can be chayiv for avar menachai. But he says, Rava says that there's a limitation to Rebbe. Intim salem esav Rebbe machshavas eichlin shma machshava. That when a person has a machshava about what he intends to do with this eichlin, that dictates how it's treated. If he had in mind that he was going to eat it, each aver separately, but then it ended up he ate the whole thing at one time. Maybe he did it b'shoigig, and we're talking about lagabi bringing the carbon chatas, but he really intended to eat them separately. But it just worked out that it didn't happen. So then the din is, he should be chayiv because his machshava was to eat them separately. So even though he holds in general when one eats a whole animal, the avarim are not treated separately, but if he had a machshava, eat them separately, that would be enough to make the avarim separately, and then he would agree with Elazar of Shimon that he's chayiv. Acher le mechayev, acher le hai mechayev. So can there be such a thing that because of his machshava he's going to be chayev, but someone else who ate it would be pater? Amalei zelafi machshavte v'zelamim fi machshavte. No, it's not a problem. Rava says, just like if we're saying that a person's machshava can dictate, then ain't a chanami. It's not that different people are being chayev treated differently. It's each one is going according to his machshava. And the Gemara says there's another outcome of this din. Amar Rava imtim tzaloim esavar Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Elazar Reb Shimon said that typically when a person eats a whole behema, it also is included the different parts of it. That he holds b'chayeya le'evarim oimedes. An animal is always intended to be divided up into its evarim, and therefore he's chai for ever min achai even when he eats the whole animal. But if you hold, according to Elazar Shimon, machshavas oichlin shma machshava, that a person can have a machshava, chishav la'oichla mesa va'oichla chaya. If someone had intended not to eat it when it was alive, but his machshava was to eat it when it was dead, and then he ate it when it was alive, he's potter. It's going to be, according to this, it's going to be Rabbi Elazar Shimon would be maskim that he's potter. That means the whole din that Rabbi Elazar Shimon said that you treated a varim as if they're separate is because he says even though it's alive, his intention is to eat it separately. But if he was planning to wait till it died, and now he just changed his mind and ate it while it was alive, so this never had the chance for his machshava, the din that something that for him he was going to wait till it died. So that's when the dividing up into separate avarim was going to happen. So even though Rabbi Shimon says when your person eats something while it's alive, the etzem, his intention then is to divide it up into avarim, but this person didn't intend to eat it alive, so therefore it doesn't have the din of b'chayel le'avarim oimedes. Amalei abai mika mididilu achalei achar mechayev achalei hai pater. Amalei zelavi machshavte v'zelavi machshavte. That is not a problem. Each person is treated according to his machshav. Amar Rav Yochanan le'soichel hanefesh in abasar. Yochanan says we learn out today from the pasuk of le'soichel hanefesh im abasar. You shouldn't eat the nefesh, the life, im abasar with the basar. That teaches you the din of Eva min achai. You shouldn't eat the nefesh together with the basar. The basar is a reference to the Eva min achai. You're taking a piece of the animal while it's alive. Basar b'stei treifa lo say chelu. We say basar b'sada is a reference to basar b'sada, basar while the animal is alive, and treifa as well as treifa lo say chelu. Both of those things. They're basar min achai. There's a separate isser of basar min achai. I have a hard time. I don't understand exactly why the Gemara. We're going to mention basar min achai here. We're going to talk about it for the next few lines, and then for some reason the next Gemara that talks about being mechuyev for eva min achai then neglects to discuss the isser of basar min achai. The pashas basar min achai is eating basar without eating an entire aver, and eva min achai is when you eat an entire aver. But according to Rav, anyway, when you eat Eva min achai, you have to eat a kazayis. In any case, there are definitely two separate isurim. One of Eva min achai, eating an entire limb, and basar min achai, eating some of the basar from a chai. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, we learn them out from two separate psukim. The pasuk of L'seichel nefesh im basar is Eva min achai, ubasar basada tells you basar min achai, and treifa tells you the din. You're not allowed to eat a treifa. The general din of treifa. Leisachel, you can't eat. That's Rabbi Yochanan. V'shlaka shaimer lo soichel hanefesh im habasar ze eva min achai ubasar min achai. He says lo soichel hanefesh im habasar. The nefesh, l'chayra, what it means is nefesh is a reference to an aver. Im habasar is a reference to basar min achai. So both Eva min achai and basar min achai come from this pasuk. Basar b'stei treifa lo yichelu zeh basar min treifa. That's just the general din of that you're not allowed to eat from a treifa. Achal eva min achayu basa min achai. If someone ate eva min achai, and he also ate basa min achai, Rabbi Yochanan chayiv shtayim. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it comes from two psukim. Each one has a different loisei chelu. So therefore, you're going to be chayiv two malchus. There's Shimon ben Lakish ain't chayiv alachas. But according to Shimon Reish Lakish, both basa min achai and eva min achai come from the pasuk l'basa b'stei treifa. You only chayiv one. Achal basa min achai or basa min atreifa. If he ate basa min achai and basa min atreifa, l'Shimon Reish Lakish. Sham, according to Shlakish, they come from two separate psukim. Treifa only tells you din of treifa, and basar comes from the pasuk of basar b'state, or leiseichel nefesh in basar. The Rabbi Yochanan chayiv alachas. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you only chayiv one because basar as well as treifa both come from the basar b'state treifa. Achal eva min achayu basar min ha-treifa. But Eva ben Achai and Basa ben Achai, different called Chayiv Shtayim. But according to both Yochanan and Reish Lakish, it's coming from two separate psukim, different loisei chelus, different lavim for one of them, for each of them. Prekdum Veramini, Achal Eva ben Achai, min ha-treifa. If someone ate Eva ben Achai, now we're not talking about two separate incidents, but he ate Eva ben Achai from an animal that was a treifa. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv Stam. Shtayim. And we had just said, the last thing we had said, that Eva min achai and Basa Treifa, everyone agrees it comes from two separate psukim. But Rabbi Yochanan says Yechai, so Rabbi Yochanan says Chai Shtayim, Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar Chayev Alachas. You only chayev one. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Nicha. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it makes sense. It comes from two separate psukim. So you understand why there's two separate isurim. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Kasha. According to Reish Lakish, why you only chayev one? Amar Rabbi Yosef like Kasha. Kam bebehema achas, kam b'shtei behemis. Depends on whether it's two separate behemoths or a single behemoth. B'shtei behemoths chayiv shtayim, behema achas pligi. But the machlokes is only by behema achas. That's where Rabbi Yochanan will say you only chayiv one. Behema achas v'may pligi. What's taka the reason why Rabbi Yochanan will say on the behema achas? I'm sorry, what Shimon Lakish will say that by behema achas you only chayiv one. Rabbiya, the reason is going to come down to the din of ein iser chalisa. Kagoin shenitrafa im yitzias ruba. We're talking about where the animal became a treifa as it was being born. So the din treifa came as it was being. One man the Amma says that when he eats when you eat the aver from the animal, that din that each aver is looked at separately happens as soon as the animal is born, because like we had that earlier machlokes, does a behema have a din while it's alive that it's treated as made up of its different devarim and each aver has a separate din of aver min achai, or does that just happen when you take off the aver or when the animal dies? So according to Manda Amar that so then it's Ever Bahadi Adodika, so they both came at the same time, and therefore there's no problem made as a Chalisar. The other Manda Amar holds like the Manda Amar before that it's not considered separate at that time. The Isser Ever comes later. The Isser Ever comes later. The question is, though, even though the Isser Ever comes later, maybe it's Chal. Like we had said before in the previous Mishnah, Ever min achai is the Isser Chamor, because it applies even to a Ben Nayach. So even though normally ain't Isser Chal Isser, but Ever min achai would be an exception. It could be Chal, even on the Isser Treifa that came earlier. Everyone agrees that Behema B'chayeh is Levar Memedes. Going Shenitrafa La'achamikan, and the Treifa came afterwards. It didn't become Treifa B'shas later. But the question is the other way around. Maybe Isser Treifa could be Chal on Isser Eva. Masav Asi Chayil, Masav Le'asi B'chayil. They're just arguing about the etzem din of whether Isser Chal or Isser. Rabbi Yochanan will say Asi Issa V'chal Issa, and that's why you're Mechayev too. And Rosh Lakish will say that Ein Issa Chal Issa. So they're arguing about the basic din of Issa Chal Issa. Rava Amar, fourth teretz, Kegoin Shenitl Shmimena Aver. We're talking about where an aver was separated from the animal, v'tarfa. By removing the aver, that's what causes it to become a trait. V'tarfa. Marsava behem b'chayei levarim eino medis. One Madama says it was never, didn't have a din avarim before the aver was separated. So then, as you remove the aver, that's at that time. That's when the Isser Treva comes, and that's when the Isser Aver comes. So that is the different ways of explaining why Rabbi Yochanan would say, why Rish Lakish would say that you're only going to be chayiv one Isser over here, because different versions, different explanations of Ein Isser Chal Isser. Now the Gemara is going to have a second runaround, pretty much of the same thing in a different context. If someone ate chaylev has an Isser chaylev, and he ate it from a live animal, mina treif, and the animal is also a treif, chayiv shtayim. Over here, Rabbi Yochanan is saying you only chayiv two, even though there were three potential isurim here. Amle Ravami v'leima mar shalish, shani yoyim shalish. I have a version of this that was said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan that he's chayiv two. Imanami am Rabbi Yochanan ochel chaylev min hachayim min hatreifa chayiv shalish. So why do you say that it's only two and I have it that it's three? So what's the difference? We're talking about where it became a treifa at the time of the birth, when most of the animal came out. So that's the time. That's a way of saying the time of later. Manda Amar Shalish, the Manda Amar says Yichayev all three for Evim and Achai and Treifa and Chaylev Kasava Behem B'Chayeya Le'Vara Moy Medis. So the Isser Aver was as soon as it was born. So the Isser Chaylev, Isser Aver, the Isser Treifa B'Hadi Adoni Kasi. All three Isurim, as the animal is being born, it gets an Isser Chaylev and it has an Isser Evim and Achai and has an Isser Treifa. What's talking about became a treifa at the time of birth. He says, even though the Isser Chaylev and treifa came at the same time, but the Isser Aver did not happen at that time. It wasn't there until the animal had the Aver removed. Isser Chaylev, Isser Treifa, Ika, Isser Aver loy, Ika, Isser Aver loy asi Chayel, and therefore the Isser Aver cannot be Chalin. So you could say, it's Avarim is not Levarim Medes. So why would you say this three L'chayre Avarim comes later? But may say Yisr Aver, Chayla Yisr Chaylev, B'chayla Yisr Chaylev, Yisr Treifa Kamifli. We're talking about again the same question of whether Yisr Aver has a Chumrah, because it's even by Bnei Noach. Masav Asi Chayel, or Masav Yisr B'chayel. Mandama says it could be Chayel, one says it's not. So if the Hema B'chayeh is considered to have started at the time of birth. But we're talking about the treifa came later. It wasn't nitrafa at the time of birth. The question is whether an Isser treifa can be chal on an Isser eva. Masav asi chayil. One manama says this is a new svara that treifa could be chal on the Isser chayva, on the Isser eva. What's the reason? One manama holds it could be chayil midi dehave achayil. Just like Chaylev, the Amar Mar, HaTorah Amar Yaveh Isser Nevela Yachal Al Isser Chaylev, the Yaveh Isser Treifa Yachal Al Isser Chaylev. They're just like Isser Nevela, that the Isser Nevela and the Isser Treifa, there's a pasuk that tells you, it says Loiser Chaylu an extra time. That tells you that Isser Nevela and the Isser Treifa can be chal on the Isser Chaylev that came earlier. Both these things, Nevela and Treifa, happen later. So this Madam would say that just like Nevela and Treifa can be chal on the Isser Chaylev, so too the Isser Aver also will be learned out from them, and it will also, just like Treifa Mechala Isser Aver. Just like Treifa can be chal on Chaylev, it also can be chal on the Aver. on the Isser Ever Min HaChai. Either Chachelev Hu Dechayev, it's only on Chelev that the Isser Trefa can be Chal later. The Hutam Miklola, because Chelev is something that is only applies to a behemoth. It doesn't apply to a Chaya V'oif. So therefore, since it has a heter, Ever has no heter for Chaya V'oif, loy. It will not be, it can't be learned out from the heter of Trefa to it. Ki aser of dimi ama. Ba minei Rishon min Lakshan Rabbi Yochanan. Chilka mi b'chutz. If someone took a kazayas from an Ever Min HaChai and he divided into two and he ate them separately, mao. Amalei potter. He said he's potter. What happens if he had two half kazesim and he put them into his mouth and he ate them like that? Amalei chayiv. On that he's going to be chayiv. He says this is talking about whether you can be either on a chatzi kazayis. Does it have to be that he eats it all at the same time, or does it have to be? Does it have to be that it's together when he puts it into his mouth? Does it have to be together when he's chewing it inside his mouth? He's going to be bifnim. He says he has it as a machlokes that it's not the Rish Lakish asked the question, but rather Rish Lakish disagreed. He said he's potter if he chews it inside of his mouth. Since he had it in his mouth, so his throat got all of it at the same time, so it's a single kazayis. It has to go down. It's not all going to go to his throat at the same time. He's going to eat a half a kazayis and then another half a kazayis, and you don't have a full kazayis at one time. No one swallows a whole kazayis at one time. It always goes down to your stomach at different times. It's talking about a certain, the only time, it sounds like from him, the only time you're going to be chayiv for Ever Min HaChai is the small bone that people eat all in one shot. Okay, we'll stop over here. I don't want to go so late. Shkayach.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, well, you're going to be in show tomorrow, yo?
No, tomorrow I don't expect. Why? Are they starting the minyan?
No. I just wanted to know. No, that's fine. That's fine.
And I'm heading back to the mountains.
Okay, it works better for me too.
Okay, good. Hopefully next week we'll have the minyan.
Yeah, have a good day.
Take care.